Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you all for coming right after lunch. You know, I think they have an auction for who gets which slots, and I forgot to bid, so here I am, here you are. It's great. Welcome to my hometown. How many of you are kind of from Bay Area? Okay, mostly. Good. So you know about all the problems. I don't have to warn you about the mission and okay, good. It is a great pleasure to be able to just hop on Muni and go to a conference, though, I gotta say, after years and years of getting on airplanes and going to various weird places. Thank you to Plato for putting this together. I'm an early investor. Plato's very much aligned with my personal mission, which is to help geeks feel safe in the world. And so thanks to them, and thank you all for coming. The 2016, I'm in the back of an ambulance, sirens going. We're taking the half-hour trip from the goat farm where I lived to Grants Pass Hospital because I had lost the ability to speak. And how I got there and what I did about it and what in the world does that have to do with coaching is the topic of today's presentation. We do have questions set up on Slido, so please do put your questions in. If the technology fails us, there's still the thing where we can talk to each other. I realize it's some new kind of technology, but we'll just give that a try if the technology fails us. But I would love to have a conversation with you to the degree we can, where I'm standing up here, blazing hot lights are in my face. I can't see your faces, but the more human connection we can get, even in this kind of odd environment, the better. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom back from the ambulance and the no talking thing, and we'll get back to that in a minute. When I came out of college, this is 1983, I had the great good fortune to work at Tektronix Labs. Tektronix Labs at that time was at the forefront of what personal computing was becoming. We had a commercial version of Smalltalk, which was by far the most advanced programming environment available then, and in some ways still exceeds what's available to most programmers today. And one of the people on that remarkable team was Ward Cunningham. And Ward is the inventor of the wiki, an outstanding engineer, super bright guy, big thinker. And I was a young engineer and not aware of my limitations. I think that's a nice way to put that. So I was just, kind of like a puppy dog, into everything, trying all kinds of stuff out. When I'd learn stuff, I'd want to tell everybody. And Ward was an established research scientist. He'd done big projects at Tech. He was, kind of everybody knew him. He was one of the more senior people. And we wanted to teach about this object-oriented programming thing that was just coming up. And he had some sample code that he wanted to use in the class. So we sat down together, and he showed me this sample code, and I would say, oh, I don't understand how this works. And he'd say, and went back and forth, gave those classes, and began this a remarkable collaboration in which Monday morning we'd have a cup of coffee at the top of the Tech, which was the cafeteria on the top floor. Programmers and names, you gotta love them. And we'd say, well, what do we want to do this week? And we'd set out to do something that had never been done before. And about Wednesday, if we had a demo, we would demo it to everybody. We'd write a tech report, finish that by Friday, and then the next Monday we'd start over. But if it wasn't going well, we'd just kind of drop it and do other stuff until the next Monday. And this was the beginning of the formalization of pair programming. The pair programming goes way, 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 way back. Back to when teletypes were really expensive and programmers were relatively cheap. So you'd have two people working at one machine. As the conversation between Ward and I developed, though, it began very much as he was the senior and I was the junior. Kind of touch my keyboard, I'll break your fingers kind of thing. And gradually, though, I was able to say, oh, you missed a period there. Oh, the parentheses don't balance. Oh, and I started picking up on the patterns of what the code ought to look like. And then I'd say, well, why'd you name this variable this? And we'd go back and forth on naming and have more and more conversations. And then eventually I was making suggestions he didn't understand, so he would gingerly hand me the keyboard and then take it back as soon as he understood what was going on. And we had this dialogue, the result of which is that I began to understand the rhythm of engineering. You can understand how to engineer this and engineer that, but if you don't know when and how much and when to back off and when to press forward, you don't really understand engineering. And the only way that you can get a deep sense of that is by watching somebody who's really good at it. So I had this remarkable experience of generational teaching and learning as the foundation of the rest of my career. And then, as I said, Ward went on to invent the wiki and did a bunch of other interesting stuff. I went off and did things in kind of a different direction. But that experience of being a junior and being able to rely on a senior to support me in my learning is built very deep into my experience of engineering. So 2011, I went to Facebook. I have long stories about this. I'm giving you the short version of absolutely everything, so here we go. 2011, I went to Facebook. After about 6 months, I was probably the worst C++ programmer at Facebook, and that was not going to last. So one of my friends, Peter Dimoff, said, well, you've talked about doing this coaching stuff. Why don't you start coaching? I thought, oh, all right, I'll give it a shot. I don't have anything to lose. So I started coaching engineers. And some of them were very successful after the coaching. Some of them left and went away. But that whole process was successful enough that it evolved into a coaching program called Good to Great, where I was coaching full time, but we'd also match up senior engineers and junior engineers for this kind of coaching engagement where you'd have 10 or 12 one-hour sessions, maybe once a week or twice a week, depending. And the curriculum, there wasn't a syllabus or a curriculum. It was my intention was to reproduce that experience that I had with Ward, where you sit down, the senior engineer establishes some boundaries about kids these days, then you have some conversations, and at the end of it, you finish up. So I had a full load of coaching students, which is probably 3 at a time, 3 or 4 at a time, and that was, no, I would do 3 in one day, which is stupid. Don't do that. But here's the thing. In those intervening years, I had spent a lot of time having these coaching conversations, mostly remotely, and I'm the sort of person who just wants to learn everything about a topic. So I had read the books, all the books about nonviolent communication and clean language open-ended, and I knew all these techniques, open-ended questions, and Carl Rogers. Oh, I remember the first time I encountered a coaching technique was a social studies class senior year in high school. And the teacher introduced us to Carl Rogers, and his therapeutic technique was you just repeat the last few words that the patient says, or the client, or whatever you want. I don't remember. Rogers had some very specific name for that. Anyway, patient. So you'd say some things, and I would just say the last few things that you just repeat, literally repeat the last few words that we said. So Melanie Cook and I were kind of picked at random to have this Rogerian conversation in front of the rest of the class. And so, it's a technique. I'm good at copying techniques. So she said something, and I just repeated what she said, and she said something else, and I just repeated what she said, and then something about how she wasn't getting her homework done. I said, "Oh, you're not getting your homework done." And then she said something, and I repeated back, and then she burst into tears. And it was like, "It's because I hate my homework." And it was so remarkable that I had helped this person come to a realization about their own lives. And I didn't have to figure it out, but I could help her figure it out. That was the first inkling of coaching that I ever had, and the first technique that I ever learned. And I don't know if it's a technique that I've consciously used, but that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that these sorts of conversations are possible. So between that, my experience with Ward, my need for job security at Facebook, I had lots of these coaching techniques. But as I said, I want to dig deep into the coaching techniques, so I learned this one and that one and that one, and I'd have them all in my head, and so I'd be having a coaching conversation, and I'm thinking about, nonviolent communication says I should say it this way, and clean language says I should say it that way, and the last conversation we had left it at this, and so I would be completely absorbed in this conversation with all these threads of thought going through my head. Do that 3 times in a day, and you're just wrung out. Do that over and over, day after day after day, absolutely wiped out. So what had happened was, it was about, I think it was about 4:30 to 5:30 coaching conversation. And about halfway through the conversation, with just one of my students, I had, all the radar was up, all of the sensors were going, and I couldn't talk. I could think of words in my head, but I couldn't make my mouth make the sounds anymore. So I just kind of stumbled through, I'm not feeling well, I need to stop this. Managed to get that hung up. My son and daughter-in-law were up at the house. We were on this goat farm. They were at the house. Somehow got word up to him that I was having trouble. He called the ambulance. He comes down. I'm sort of wandering around outside, completely out of it. I still can't talk. Ambulance pulls up. They bundle me in and start the trip back. Now, at this point, I'm completely panicked. It's like waking up and being tied up or something. I'm helpless, absolutely helpless. And talking is the way that I make my living. So this is not good, definitely not good. So we make our way there. We're getting kind of close. My son and daughter-in-law are in a car behind us following the ambulance. And I had the first glimmerings that I was going to be okay. So I said to the ambulance attendant, I could start to form sentences. I said to the ambulance attendant, I suppose that it would be completely inappropriate if you were to step out of the ambulance and just kind of shake your head. And this guy went berserk. He's like, he goes up to the driver. He's like, oh, you can't believe what this mother just said. And they're just laughing uproarious. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll be okay if I can make inappropriate jokes again. I'll be all right, even if I lose, the rest of my functions. As long as I can upset people at that level, I'll be okay. So, did a bunch of tests. Nothing conclusive came back. The two diagnoses are atypical migraine, and I've since had migraines that are, make that a plausible diagnosis, or a transient ischemic attack, which is like a temporary blockage of a blood vessel in your brain. So it's a stroke, but then your brain clears it out. So it was one of those two, probably. This left me, though, shaken. Like I was not able to speak coherently. I had to take a couple of weeks off. And I was left with this dilemma. My identity is as a coach. My living is as a coach. And I cannot keep coaching in this same kind of way that I've been coaching. What am I going to do? So when I came back, I thought, well, you know what? I've got this giant backpack full of techniques, and I'm just going to set it down. And what I'm going to do is have conversations with people where I'm trying to be my best self. I'm going to try and bring a fully present me, but I'm not going to work at it. I'm not going to try and figure out which words to say in which order. I'm just going to be myself. And the transformation was absolutely remarkable. My coaching effectiveness went way up, and my coaching effort expended went way, way down. And some of the conversations were very familiar. An engineer would say to me, oh, this project is so messed up. And I'd say, well, how do you know? What are the units? How are you measuring that? What's the variance of that? Did I ask those questions because they were on the list of engineering coaching questions you're supposed to ask? No. I asked those questions because I'm an engineer and I'm curious. And sometimes those questions would lead to quite personal, things going on in your life. I had somebody ask me to go with him to his first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. That's a coaching moment. That wouldn't have happened, I don't think, if I'd been following the rules for communicating this way, that way, blah, blah, blah. And so that's my message to you today, is coaching conversations. The ultimate coaching technique is no technique. It is bringing your best self. Notice I don't say, oh, just be yourself as a coach. Be your best self. And as a coach, you have a large responsibility. You have a larger responsibility than your student has. You're responsible for bringing your best self to that conversation in a way that they might not be ready to yet. But once you're in that conversation, you have the preparation, and then once you're in that conversation, the best I can do as a coach is to be myself. Everything else that I do that isn't me being my best self is worse. So no matter how good I want to be, the best I can be is the best I can be. So that's my focus now in coaching conversations is how can I prepare before the conversation? In the conversation, how can I get to that ground state of, like, here I am, both feet are planted, my ears are open, my heart is open, I'm listening. And then, as the follow-up to the conversation, how can I maintain that relationship to see what somebody's ready to take away, what are they ready to do on the next go-around, where are they ready to go next? So I wasn't sure I could put all of that in 20 minutes, but you know what? That's 20 minutes. And we're ready for questions. Do we have questions?
We do. Thank you for your humility and sharing. I know that's probably hard to, share all the vulnerable moments of not being able to speak. I can't imagine. Okay, first question. Ready? Did your medical emergency lead you to question the pace and intensity of the tech industry, and how can we balance urgency and well-being?
I grew up about 40 miles south of here, and my dad was an engineer. And so, no, it did not lead me to question the pace and urgency of the tech industry. We are at the center of change. And change happens slowly, except when it happens fast. And when it's happening fast, I want to go the speed of the change. It certainly changed this style of coaching, this present, I don't have a name for it yet.
The Kent Beck style.
Okay, fair enough. This Kent Beck style of coaching is certainly easier to sustain than the style I was trying to apply before, where I just had this enormous bag of tricks. That said, I don't have lots of coaching conversations now. It's very hard to get paid what I think it's worth. But overall, this is what we do, is work in ways that seem slow for a long time, and then every once in a while, like AI is blowing up right now. I have these conversations. Oh, we downloaded the new version of the blah, 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 and it's 25% better than it was last week. This happens. And when it happens, either you're in front of the wave or you're behind the wave. So, interesting question, though. Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one. If you had to give your ambulance ride a code review, what would be the most critical piece of feedback you'd provide to the paramedics?
No, they were perfect. They responded as human beings would. So if this was an attempt to get me to go off on code reviews, you lose. I'm not going to do that just yet.
All right. Fair enough. Okay, one's from Ryan. I also love to learn everything about a topic. Do you feel the desire to research delays making decisions compared to failing fast and learning?
Do I feel the need to research?
Do you feel the desire to research delays making decisions compared to failing fast and learning?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so this book, Tidy First, that I just published last week, and I have a copy in the back, so sorry for not having a prop. I spent 18 years trying to figure out how to explain software design. What I discovered is the hardest things to explain are not what the design should be, it's when the design should happen and why it is the way it is, what forces shape it. Those are really difficult problems that people haven't really dug into. So that when question of, yes, we should design, but today or later, it's built into the title of the book, Tidy First, ? I have some messy code, I need to change it, should I tidy first? This is a when question, not a what question. So yes, absolutely, and I think we don't talk enough about the cost of delay or the value of delay. And as we mature as a discipline, we can't avoid those questions.
All right. So I think there's a lag on our app. So is there anyone in the audience with a live question? I see one question back there. Jeremy?
Yeah. I'd love to understand, with this new paradigm, how do you approach preparation in coaching? How did that change the way you prepare?
Okay, so I'll repeat the question. With this new paradigm with the Kent Beck style. Damn you. How do you approach preparation? So I still prepare carefully. There will be times when I'll spend 2 or 3 hours preparing for a coaching conversation. Like I'll want to let me show you, I want to show you test-driven development, but on your code, not on my code. So I'm going to grab some of your code and I'm going to just TDD the hell out of it for 2-3 hours, just so that I know when the time comes to have that conversation that I'm 100% confident. I think the 100% confident part is more important than the intellectual preparation, but I will certainly prepare. And if I'm having trouble getting through to a student, I just had one of these today where there was a student and I just couldn't get through to them, and it just bugged the hell out of me. And I will wake up in the night going, And every once in a while, that will crack open. I had a student that, anyway, it would be a long answer, but I worked, I don't know, 6-8 hours worth of prep just to figure out the one exercise, and then it all built up to this moment where I got in the middle of this exercise, and he goes, "Oh," and that was it. Right? That's a $1 million moment, and it's worth preparing. So I will prepare. Sometimes I just walk into a conversation, and it's just fine. Most of the time, that's what it is. But if I know that there's like a turning point coming, I will prep hard for that in whatever way makes sense. Then discard the preparation as we go into the conversation. Does that answer your question? Yes, it does. Okay.
Right. Any other questions? Looks like we have one way back here.
All right, thank you. So you mentioned sort of like organizing or creating a mentorship program at Facebook, and I was kind of curious, do you have any tips on scaling mentoring and coaching and I guess coaching coaches in a way?
Yes, yeah. So I spent probably half of my time coaching coaches in there. By the way, that coach student, that's my vocabulary. I know that Plato does mentoring, and there's an interesting but tedious debate about all the variations of that. So the main thing I would say is if you're in a leadership position and you want the benefits of these kind of conversations, you're going to have to deliberately encourage these conversations to happen. Maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I was a pup, it was very natural to have that senior-junior conversation happen. As we've tried to make everything more efficient and more totally 100% utilized, it's harder and harder to do that. There were cases where we'd have very effective coaches at Facebook who would be explicitly told by their managers to knock it the hell off. They had code to write, which is, to me, is a incredibly short-sighted decision. So if you're in a position to create the incentives for these conversations to happen, for the incentives for the ICs who can have the conversations, as well as incentives for the managers of those ICs to make sure that the organization is continually refreshing its stock of leadership. So I think that's the main thing. The other thing I did that was extremely effective was I brought in a storytelling coach, a guy in Berkeley, Joel Ben-Izzy, wonderful book, The Beggar King and the Secret of Happiness, came and gave us a workshop about storytelling that in the end left everybody in tears. It was amazing and fantastic. Storytelling is the fundamental coaching skill. So encouraging that skill, practicing it on each other, I don't think you can do better than that. Does that answer your question? Super.
Great. I think we're about out of time, but I have a question for you. What do you enjoy so much that you completely lose track of time?
Poker.
Poker?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. I go to Vegas for 2 weeks every year just to play poker. I probably play poker 2-3 nights a week.
Wow.
While I'm here, and yeah, the time time just disappears. The art is the same way for me, for sure. And then other than that, no, those are the things that really make time melt for me.
Amazing. All right. Well, I very much enjoyed your talk. I'm sure our audience did as well. Let's
All right.
give a round
Thank you
of
so
applause
much.
to Kent Beck.